Welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. I'm your host, Dorcas. As a psychotherapist who has worked with children, couples, individuals, and families for decades, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, my family is the worst, or I'm too embarrassed to talk about my family, or no family is like mine. Well, guess what, listeners? All families have ishness, foolishness, happiness, shadiness, loneliness, forgiveness, hopefulness, goodness, and the list goes on. If you come from a family and are trying to navigate your family relationships, then welcome. Please keep in mind, I am not providing therapy or medical advice. And here's a heads up. Once in a while, I will curse. So if you're looking for a clean, no foul language kind of show, this is not it. All right, good afternoon. Welcome, audience. Welcome, Taffy. Here we are for our episode number 17. And our topic for today is about family roles, right? Everyone has a role that they play in their family system. So Taffy and I decided we would dive into the different roles, and maybe you, audience, can also identify what your role is and keep the conversation going. All right, Taffy, welcome. How are you?
Oh, thank you. I'm good, thank you. We have a long weekend here, so an extra free day, which is really nice. And how are you?
I'm doing well. I think recovering from tennis, as I shared before. My highs are very high, you know. I get really emotionally vested in these matches. And so both outcomes were wonderful. So
Yeah.
yes, I am on cloud nine. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about family roles because, again, this is something when I think back to myself, my life, who I am, I just was always very curious about people and
Mm.
family and what we do and why we do what we do. And I remember really being young. I think I just was always someone who liked to analyze relationships and try to understand them, and I would always be questioning, why does this person act this way? And why does this person do this? And why are these people together? And so yeah, I mean, the topic of roles is one that I can talk about for days as well. But yeah, I mean, before we jump in and talk about the different types of roles, do you have an idea? I guess maybe we can start with the very first one. So share with the audience the first role we'll talk about and maybe your thoughts about it.
So the first one is the golden child, and as the title says, it's the favorite child, I would say, the one that can do no wrong or
Right.
Um, yeah, and I think it also comes with a lot of responsibility
Yes.
when a child is given, and it's usually unspoken.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that's what I would say about the golden child.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And sometimes it's very spoken. I hear a lot of people who will say, oh, my brother was the golden child, and my mom would say he was the favorite, or we were always compared to him. So I think
Mm,
sometimes it can be very spoken.
yeah,
But you are correct in that it comes with a lot of responsibility because you then sort of have to live up to it.
yeah,
And if you fail or you fall short in some way or another, you feel bad about yourself because I'm supposed to do well and excel in everything. So I think there's a lot of pressure with being labeled as the golden child. Um, and so when I think about examples that come to mind for me, I I think there are many, like when I look at different families, right?
Mm,
I can see in which family the unspoken golden child, right? And we can talk African culture or Western culture or, but you could always tell like this is the one that's probably viewed as the golden child, right?
right.
They often strive for perfection. They, you know, become high achievers, right? And they will show up as the golden child while they may not be in other ways or in front of other people. But to the
Mm,
parents, it's like, this is how I'm viewed, or this is what I'm expected to be. And so I'm always going to present as the golden child, even though I might not be, right? So behind the scenes, I can do all sorts of, um, you know, uh, judgmental, unexpected, uh, questionable actions,
Thing-
but
yeah.
right. But I always want to make sure that in my parents' eyes, I'm viewed as the golden child. So yes, I mean, I would say, in practice, I think it definitely takes a toll on people to live up
Right.
to this reputation. And unfortunately, right, so if we talk even about how these roles come about, sometimes it has to do with sibling position, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it has to do with what is happening when you were conceived, right? Was your parents' marriage great and they were at
Mm,
peace and everything was fine and you came along and you were this perfect child and everything was good, right? Or yeah, I mean, they could have been going through challenges as well. And then you came along and you were viewed as a blessing. And then a lot of projection was on
yeah.
you, to be this golden child for the family. So there are many factors, I think, that contribute to how people become a golden child. Anything you want to add to that or say more about that?
I was just thinking about how because I think in and I we can talk about this later, but the example that I would give would actually be my own, which is I'm a firstborn daughter in an African household. So, you know,
Mm,
I became when especially when I was younger, and I think there's still remnants of it, like the golden child, because I was the smart one. And but it's also interesting when I think about my journey that there was a time where I started to reject that role very deliberately. I think in my mid 20s, where I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to do what I want. I don't want to be anyone's role model.
mm,
Please don't look to me for
mm,
to be anyone's role model. So I think
right.
I'm just thinking about how um how the person being given the role, how they manage that throughout their lives, and how it could evolve from being one role to maybe evolving into another role. For
Yeah.
example, becoming the scapegoat or the peacemaker, or
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so like there are other ways I think I can also look at the golden child label. So like there is in therapy this model, it's called the drama triangle, and
mm,
pretty much labels um behavior as there's a persecutor, there's a victim, and there's a rescuer. And so usually, not necessarily usually, the golden child can also fall into that rescuer role because
mm,
you are constantly trying to fix things, to keep the peace, to do all those things, right? And just as you described with your own example, I think you got tired after a while of
Yeah.
being this person, right? So yeah, I think the golden child can definitely play a lot of the rescuer role where, there's a problem, let me fix it, who's unhappy or whatever, whatever. And yeah, everyone just gushes over the golden child because
Hmm.
there's a lot of expectation and you try and live up to it. All right, so let's jump into scapegoat, black sheep.
Right.
Not a fan of the word black sheep or term black sheep, but I think we know where these terms come from and why.
Yeah.
Generally, what's not healing is labeled as black, and so not my
Yeah.
favorite term. But scapegoat, thoughts about that?
Scapegoat, um, that would be the child who gets blamed or labeled as the problem.
Mhm, mhm.
And so this child is probably rebellious or maybe misunderstood, outspoken. Yeah. And I think a lot of the times it's probably the family projecting just like the problems within the family onto that one child, um, just because it's easier than taking accountability and reflecting and, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, yes, this is also a common role that we see in many families. And
Mm,
again, also for various reasons, whatever's going on when a child is born, or how a parent may feel about a child, or, stressors in the family system. Just numerous factors can contribute to why a child may be viewed as the scapegoat. So there is this quote that I want to read, and there's actually a book which is called Rejected, Shamed, and Blamed: Help and
hmm
Hope for Adults in the Family who are labeled as the scapegoat. So I think I'm sort of improvising there. Yeah, in the family scapegoat role. And this book is by Rebecca Mandeville. She's a marriage and family therapist. But she has an opening quote in the foreword of this book. And the quote says, I could not ask for forgiveness for something I had not done. As scapegoat, I could only bear fault. And this quote is from Daphne du Maurier, which I think uh, aptly defines the role that a scapegoat plays, right? You don't have a choice. You're put in this role, and
mm,
it is what it is. You can't refuse being labeled as the scapegoat. So yeah, I think this is a role that can really take a toll on a person's functioning as a child. If you're constantly being blamed for things going wrong. And I actually heard a comment today. Um, yeah, so talking to someone and talking about their family, and
mm,
one daughter in the family, the rest are brothers. And apparently, the dad blamed the mother for everything that went wrong with the daughter, right? So, daughter not, finishing college, daughter, becoming, problem child, so to speak. So mother in this case was scapegoated, right? Which can also happen. But it is unfortunate because I think when children are labeled as the scapegoat, this is something that sticks with them for throughout their lives until they
yeah.
work through it and they find a way to see themselves and not as this role that was thrust upon them, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. So it really can take a toll, you know. Um, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I black sheep I don't like. I mean, we sort of put these in the same category, but I think
Hmm.
black sheep has more of a negative connotation because it basically means you are not worthy, right? What
Yeah,
you do, you'll never, achieve. You'll always be compared to someone else, right?
yeah,
Whatever decisions you make in life, it won't be welcomed or
yeah.
accepted, you know?
Almost like a lost cause.
Yes, yes,
The one that can become outcast,
yes,
outcasted, I think. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that too, is one that sticks with people and it takes a toll. And it's hard to dismantle these roles that we develop within our family systems, right? So talk about the lost child.
The lost child is the quiet child, usually overlooked and emotionally distant.
Mhm,
And I think they tend to withdraw from family drama, spend a lot of time alone, potentially daydreamers or escapist, and read maybe a lot of books, fantasy books, fiction, or
mhm,
are immerse themselves into hobbies just to
mhm,
kind of create a buffer between reality and
mhm.
themselves. And of course, it's a protective mechanism. So, yeah, they're
Yeah.
just not quite there.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's they kind of learn early that being invisible is safer than being seen, and possibly hurt.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, yeah. And for sure, I think the lost child can easily get lost in a family system because
Mm,
they're trying not to draw attention to themselves, right? And in a family where there is chaos, it's easy to ignore the lost child because the problematic ones will get the most attention, right?
yeah,
And so, but the lost child is one to be concerned about
yeah.
because sometimes, they could be severely depressed and
Mm-hmm.
not talk about it, right? So they shut down and as you've described, cope in their own ways. And when I think about what can lead to a child becoming the lost one, so, going back to therapy terms again, right? So in structural family therapy, you are assessing for three types of boundaries within a family system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the boundaries can be clear, which is always the goal, right? When boundaries are clear in a family, everyone knows their role,
Mm,
everyone is comfortable communicating, expressing their emotions, right? We can easily balance being together and being individuals. It's not viewed as a problem.
mm-hmm.
Right. And then when the boundaries are rigid, then you will tend to see probably some lost children there because they're afraid to come too close. And so people become more independent and, I'm just going to stay away because it is too rigid in this family system, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'll go and do my own thing, develop my own interests, and so on. So this is, one of the outcomes you can see when a family system has boundaries that are too rigid. Then the final type of boundary is diffuse, which means just we don't know what's happening, right? We don't
Yeah.
know what's happening. Are we close? Are we not? Should I ask you a question? Should I not? Are you okay? What's your mood like? Right. And so there's this back and forth of behavior where children, again, are trying to figure out, is it safe to talk to mom? Or is it okay to go and ask dad a question? Or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, well, there might be too much enmeshment where we are overly close, which could mean I'm I worry excessively about you, and so on and so on. So yes. So the lost child again can also show up in this type of family system where the boundaries are not very clear and they are confusing. And so, for sure, as a way to protect myself, I will stay away, right? But those ones who stay away are the ones we want to um, reach out to the most and hear where they are emotionally, especially in the family system. And I think what can also happen is sometimes you will see in families where there's a child who has some sort of illness, if it's chronic or terminal or some sort of a disability, right? Then a lot of attention is given to that child, and then other siblings can easily become lost
Mm-hmm.
because, oh, Joe needs attention. Joe is sick. Joe has to go to the doctor, right? So mom has no energy or time for me, so I'm just gonna stay in the background. Um, so that's I think also another possibility. All right, next on the list of roles, Taffy.
The next one is the peacemaker. And this is the family's emotional buffer. So, in some ways, maybe similar to the lost child, but not quite. I think with the peacemaker, they're the ones that try to soothe conflict in the home and tensions and try to keep everyone happy.
Hmm.
Um, and it's because have, they might feel like the harmony in the home is fragile,
Yeah,
and they take it upon themselves to manage everyone's emotions and to manage the temperature in the home. And yeah, that's what I would
yeah,
say, maker.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's also a challenging role to play, because you try to be in tune, like you said, with everyone's needs, right?
Yeah.
How is Tuffy doing? And how is mom? And how is brother? And, what can I do, right, to make this person feel better? Or so as a peacemaker, you work really hard.
Yeah.
And this role, I think, probably like most roles, it trickles into other areas of your life.
Oh
So
yeah.
you're not just that in your family, but
Yeah.
you probably are the peacemaker in your friendships and in your relationship and at work, right?
Yeah.
I can see, Sue the accountant is really upset today. I wonder if I did something wrong. Maybe I should email Sue and find out if everything's okay. Same
Yeah.
type of role in friendships as well. And so this is always a question that I ask people is, do you find that you play this role in your other relationships? And for sure, it's always, yep, 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 yep. I'm the one who's planning, who's organizing, who's doing all of the stuff, who's reaching out, who's checking on people. So a very difficult role to play as peacemaker and psychologically, again, takes a toll.
Same.
And also, I think not easy to change. It
Mm-hmm.
is possible, but it's work because you have to always assess, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of, texting Tuffy right now to make sure she's okay? Like, is there something I really need to do, right?
Mm.
Mm, yeah. So, and I think when I think about a peacemaker, I also think about the child who may use humor as a way to distract
Mhm.
from family conflict or chaos because they want to maintain peace, right?
Yeah,
So when the emotional climate is really heavy, it's like, you know what? I'll crack a joke, right?
yeah,
Just to
yeah,
sort of maintain the peace.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like very preemptive, and you become very hyper vigilant. And like you're saying, I think later on in life, you're that person that's always picking up, very good at picking up on the temperature of the room, or know how to read the room, or know how to read in between the lines, because that's what you had to do in order to survive. It's sort of like walking on eggshells. And this reminds me, I think it was Will Smith that has spoken about, he when he was growing up,
Mhm.
he took that role of being
Yeah.
funny, because I think
Yeah.
the dad was abusive. So he felt that if I can make everyone laugh,
Yeah.
then it keeps everything light. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Very, very, very common role.
Hmm.
And yes, unfortunately, I think you will notice that even in, you know, traumatic experiences, some people have just become so accustomed to using humor as a way to soften the pain of a
Hmm.
traumatic experience, and they'll say it, jokingly or laughing about it, you know. And yeah, I mean, for sure, if I think about my family, my mom is a comedian, my brother is also a comedian. I think, we all have a tinge of humor that we use. But yes, I mean, I think, knowing my mom's story and everything she's been through, it is not
Hmm.
a surprise that humor became her defense strategy, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we don't want to overlook the fact that someone laughs that they're not in pain as well. All right, so one more role we will talk about and just have a quick discussion before we wrap up. So the final role we have listed.
Is the caregiver. Um, and so that is the child that is parentified. So the one that grows up too fast,
Mhm,
and takes on parental roles,
mhm,
supporting siblings, uh,
mhm.
comforts maybe a struggling parent, and keeps the household functioning.
Yeah,
And it often occurs in homes with addiction, and again, illness,
yeah,
or absent parents,
yeah.
or parents that are emotionally unavailable. And
Hmm.
this can lead to, in adulthood, people that overfunction or are perfectionistic and have trouble asking for help or trouble resting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so for sure, I think the caregiver role can show up in many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And like you've shared, sometimes it's in a family where the parent or adult in the family has an illness, and so a child steps in
Mm-hmm.
to provide care, right? This is something, you see if the primary caregiver, if it's a mother who struggles with depression, then there is a child, or many of the children are adjusting their behaviors to accommodate the needs of the person or the parent who is struggling with depression, right? And parentified children, you see sometimes in single parent homes, if one
Mm-hmm.
giver is working a lot, the other child, or sometimes the firstborn, steps in to play the role of a surrogate parent, or
Mm-hmm.
as Carl Whitaker called it, psychological incest, right? Where a child is now becoming a parent or a surrogate partner to the other parent. And this too, I think, is mentally challenging for a child because you
Yeah.
see that the child acts way too mature for their age and they don't have thoughts of being a child, right?
Yeah.
Go to school, they're worrying about mom, they're worrying about their siblings, they know I have to go and, walk my sister to school, right? So they don't have thoughts of just playing and having fun and, being a child. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so again, I think this role can follow them in their relationships as well, and they play that role and try and take care of their partners, and it continues as well.
Yeah.
In
And I'm trying to remember where I've heard this before, but this is referencing in an African, well, more specifically in maybe Zimbabwean culture, where I think especially when it's a boy child, and let's say the father passes away, or maybe
hmm
there's a divorce or something. And I think this is something that I used to hear growing up. I can't remember where, but where the mom or people will sort of
Yeah,
impose
pass
this
on.
role, like you and wa baba bemba, and
Right, right.
or
Yeah,
you're man of the house now, and this could be a
right.
teenager, or and
Yeah,
yeah. And so like
yeah,
you said, I think even with single moms, it's
yeah,
probably not on purpose, but it's sort of like that thing of like, the boy child, well, you have to step up,
right.
or he
Step
can,
up.
it's unspoken, but he can
Right.
feel like, okay, if I don't do it,
Yeah,
then no one's gonna do it, so I'm just
yeah.
going to take this role on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think single father homes, same role,
Mm,
if it's a son or a daughter,
yeah.
again, usually it falls on the oldest child to
Yeah.
take care of your siblings. I have to go to work. I'm working a double shift.
Mm-hmm.
So you start the cooking and cleaning and, putting others to bed and so on and so on. So absolutely. But yeah, the caregiver role, I think this is one that I would challenge listeners to pay attention to. And if you recognize that this is who you are, then
Mm,
how can I begin to adjust the role that I play, especially when I know it's taking a toll on me, right? That's
yeah.
always the concern is it taking a toll on you to be the golden child or the scapegoat or the caregiver, right? Or the lost child and, you know, start
And I
to
think
think
sometimes
about
they can
ways.
overlap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
As
yeah,
I'm looking at
absolutely.
them, sometimes I can see the golden child being the caregiver or the
Yeah,
peacemaker.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also depending on life transitions and or family life cycles, right?
Yeah.
That can also change people's roles
Mm-hmm.
that they play. So yeah, I mean, I think, from a psychology perspective, like Alfred Adler, well-known uh, psychotherapist, but he developed Adlerian therapy, which talked significantly about birth order and knowing how
Mm-hmm.
you described your position in your family system, right?
Yeah.
And so you might be the oldest, but did you view yourself as the oldest, or was your brother maybe the one who played the oldest brother role? Right. So, from an Adlerian perspective, it's really crucial for the person to say for themselves what role they believe they played versus me saying, "Oh, Taffy, you're the oldest, so you must have played the oldest child role, right?" And then also, Walter Toman, he also did extensive writing on birth order position. So there are some books out there by him, Toman, and So these are interesting, I think, references to take a peek into to sort of understand your role better, how it came about, if you were labeled as something, do you recall when you first heard that label, right? And why you think it stuck with you, and so I think these are questions I would encourage the audience to pay attention to as well.
Yeah.
So we are creating a poll, right? So we can find out more about the different types of roles that listeners play. And so we want to encourage you all to participate in the poll. Just identify what role you believe you play. And yeah, so we can just sort of get a gauge of, do we have more scapegoats, or do we have more golden children? You
Yeah.
know. So questions, comments, final thoughts, Taffy, before we wrap up?
Um, I mean, I think these can be potential separate episodes. I'm just thinking about, so I think there's some once in a while this comes up on the internets and the internet streets about depending on what position
Mm-hmm.
you ch like child position you are in the family,
Mm-hmm.
who should partner up with. And
Yeah.
so I've seen people say firstborns should marry or date lastborns because
Mm-hmm.
that balances things out. So I was just thinking about I was thinking about that. And
Yeah.
then also I'm currently reading When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate.
Mm-hmm.
Not an easy read, but I
Mm-hmm.
think he references a lot, of course, childhood
Yes,
and
yes.
how childhood experiences well, obviously the book is about stress
Mm-hmm.
and how, a lot of it actually starts in childhood. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the case studies that he's presenting in the book are adults that felt like they were the golden child or
Mm-hmm.
pressured to be the caregiver, and
Yeah.
how that has um, panned out throughout their lives and
Yeah.
resulted in getting cancer
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
all of these autoimmune diseases.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's also something important, I think, to think about, that these things don't just
Right.
stay in childhood,
Right.
like you said, that
Yeah.
later on they can be the reason for someone's demise. And
Yes.
a lot of the times you realize it when it's too late,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we will live in a very fast-paced world now, right? Everything is happening so quickly. And so we are sort of under a chronic state of anxiety, whether we want to be or not. And it takes being intentional to stop and say, how am I doing? What do I need? Right? Because most of us are going, going, going and chasing something. And before we know it, it's like, oh, you have this diagnosis. And like you said, usually it's a little late by then, you know.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think it really just is people making the time to stop and check in with themselves to see, how am I doing? Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do I need to take a step back today from rescuing everyone or being a peacemaker, So great, great chat. And yes, we will continue in different ways tackling these family roles. I think there's so much to be said, but
Oh yeah.
being mindful of time, we don't want to drag out this episode. But audience, thank you for listening as always, and we look forward to chatting with you soon.
Yes. Thank you for listening.
If you found it meaningful in some way and have comments to share, or you would like to share your family story, whether joyful or painful, please send an email to info@joymeetspain.com. Thank you for tuning in and for allowing me to spend this part of your day with you. Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And of course, please spread the word. Till next time, stay well and stay present.